I never should have gone back to that property. That's the one thought that keeps circling my mind even now, 3 years later. I'm sitting here, lights on, door locked, and I still feel that cold knot sitting right in the center of my chest whenever I let myself think about what happened up in those woods outside Harlan County, Kentucky. Let me take you back. I was 26 years old, working as a property assessor for a small county office. My job was simple on paper: drive out to listed properties, document conditions, take photos, fill out paperwork. Most days it was boring: empty lots, abandoned farmhouses, old barns that smelled like rust and wet hay. Nothing dramatic. Just land and silence and the occasional stray dog. In October of 2021, I was assigned a parcel of land deep in the eastern part of the county. The listing said the property had been untouched for over 18 years. The previous owner, an older man named Gerald Patton, had passed away without any next of kin. The state was preparing to auction it off, and my job was to go out there, assess the structures, and report back. The address took me 40 minutes off the main highway. The last 10 minutes were on a gravel road so narrow that tree branches scraped both sides of my truck the entire way. When I finally parked and stepped out, I remember how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, dense quiet. The kind that presses against your ears like something is actively swallowing sound. The main house was exactly what you'd expect. A collapsed porch, boarded windows. The roof had partially caved in on one side. I photographed everything methodically, wrote my notes, and figured I'd be back in my truck within the hour. That's when I noticed the trail. It wasn't on any of the property documents. Just a narrow footpath leading away from the back of the house and disappearing into the tree line. Now, part of my job was to document all structures on the land. If there was a shed or a storage unit or anything back there, I was supposed to log it. So I grabbed my clipboard and followed it. The trail went further than I expected. I walked for maybe 5-6 minutes through thick trees before I saw it. A treehouse. And I want to be clear about what I mean, because this wasn't some rotting platform nailed between two oaks. This thing was enormous. It was built across 3 large trees, old growth, massive trunks, at least 25 feet off the ground. There were actual wooden walls, a roof, a rope ladder hanging down, and next to it a wooden ladder bolted directly into the trunk. There were windows cut into the sides with what looked like plexiglass still intact. This structure had been built by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I stood there for a long moment just staring at it. In 18 years of sitting on untouched land, someone had clearly put serious time and money into building this thing. It didn't make sense for an old man living alone to construct something like this so deep in the woods. I circled the base, taking photos, writing dimensions as best I could estimate them. Then I noticed something that stopped me cold. There were fresh boot prints in the mud around the base of the ladder. Not old impressions, fresh ones. The mud was still soft and dark around the edges. Someone had been here recently. Maybe that morning. I told myself it was probably hunters, trespassers, teenagers. Harlan County had plenty of people who wandered onto posted land without thinking twice. I almost left it at that, but I needed to document the interior. That was the job. I tested the wooden ladder. It was solid, newer than it looked. I climbed. When I pushed open the hatch in the floor and pulled myself up inside, I had to stop and process what I was seeing. The space inside was maybe 12 by 14 feet. There was a cot along one wall with a wool blanket folded neatly on top of it, a small camp stove on a wooden shelf, 3-gallon jugs of water lined up against the far wall, a bucket in the corner with a lid on it, a lantern hanging from a hook in the ceiling, and on a small wooden table beside the cot, a tin cup with the faint ring of a recent coffee stain still wet at the bottom. Someone was living here. My hands went cold. I turned around slowly, scanning every corner of that room. Nobody was there, but everything in me was screaming to get down and get out. I took photos. My fingers were shaking so badly the first 3 came out blurred. I got what I needed and climbed back down that ladder faster than I went up. My boots hit the mud and I started walking back toward the trail, telling myself to move calmly, not to run. I was halfway back to the house when I heard a truck engine somewhere through the trees. Not on the road I came in on, a different direction, coming closer. I didn't wait to see who it was. I moved fast through the woods, broke out into the clearing behind the house, got to my truck and started it before my door was even fully closed. I reversed down that gravel road for nearly a quarter mile before I found enough space to turn around. I filed my report that afternoon. I included every photograph, flagged the occupied structure, and noted the fresh evidence of recent habitation. My supervisor forwarded it to the county sheriff's office. What they found when deputies went out there 2 days later is what keeps me awake at night. The treehouse had been cleaned out. The cot, the water jugs, the camp stove, all of it gone. Like none of it had ever been there. The only things left were the boot prints in the dried mud, and a single item on the floor of the treehouse that hadn't been there when I was inside. A Polaroid photograph. It was a picture of a man standing beside a gray pickup truck on a narrow gravel road, shot from a distance through trees like whoever took it didn't want to be seen. The man in the photo was wearing a brown jacket and holding a clipboard. It was me. Taken that morning while I was walking the trail to the treehouse. Someone had been out there in those woods watching me the entire time. And I never saw them, never heard them, never felt them. The sheriff's office identified the treehouse occupant as a man who had been living off-grid on abandoned rural properties across 3 counties for at least 2 years. They found a similar setup on another parcel of land 6 weeks later, 40 miles away. By that point, he was already gone again. They never caught him. And here's the part I can't shake, the part that crawls back into my mind on quiet nights when the house settles and the wind moves through the trees outside my window. In the weeks after I filed that report, I kept thinking about the timing, about how long that walk to the treehouse had taken me, about how far sound carries through dense woods and dead silence, about the fact that whoever was living up there would have heard my truck coming down that gravel road long before I ever stepped out of it. He knew I was there the whole time. While I was circling that ladder taking measurements, he was somewhere in those trees watching. While I was climbing up into his space, going through his things, taking photographs of his life, he was right there. He let me do it. He let me climb up, look around, climb back down, and walk away. And then he took a photo to make sure I knew it. I transferred out of field work 4 months later. I sit behind a desk now. I don't go out to rural properties anymore. People ask me why I made the switch, and I tell them it was the hours or the drive time or just wanting something different. I never tell them the reason, because how do you explain to someone that the most terrifying thing in the world isn't being hunted, it's being seen and deliberately let go? I was 9 years old the summer I almost didn't come home. We lived on the edge of a small town in rural Kentucky, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where kids ride their bikes until the streetlights come on, and where nobody ever locks their doors. It was 1994, no cell phones, no way for your parents to reach you the second something went wrong. You just trusted that things would be okay. We had a treehouse in the backyard. My dad built it the summer before, right in the big oak tree that sat at the back of our property, where the yard slowly gave way to a stretch of thick woods. It wasn't anything fancy. A wooden platform, 4 walls, a little window cut out facing the yard, and a rope ladder that my dad could pull up if he didn't want my little sister climbing in without permission. To me, that treehouse was the greatest place on earth. I practically lived up there from June through August. That summer, my best friend Danny and I decided we were going to spend the night in the treehouse. We'd been begging our parents for weeks. Finally, one Friday night in late July, they said yes. We packed our sleeping bags, a flashlight, a bag of chips, and a stack of comic books. We thought we were the coolest kids alive. The first few hours were perfect. We read comics until it got too dark, ate every snack we brought, and talked about absolutely nothing, the way only kids can do. Eventually, we clicked off the flashlight and just lay there in the dark, listening to the woods. Crickets, frogs, the occasional hoot of an owl somewhere deep in the trees. It was peaceful. I remember thinking I never wanted summer to end. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. Late. The kind of late where everything is completely still and the whole world feels like it's holding its breath. Danny was asleep beside me, snoring softly. I lay there for a second, not sure what had pulled me out of sleep, and then I heard it. A voice, not a scream, not something obviously wrong. Just a voice. A man's voice, coming from somewhere in the backyard below. Quiet. Low, like he was trying not to be heard. I told myself it was my dad. Maybe he came out to check on us. I crawled to the little window and looked down into the yard. It wasn't my dad. There was a man standing near the base of the oak tree. He was maybe 30 feet away, close enough that I could see the outline of him in the dark, tall, wearing a jacket despite the summer heat, with his back half turned toward the house. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, and he was talking, very quietly, almost to himself. My stomach dropped. I stayed completely still at that window for what felt like a long time, just watching him. He didn't look up. He didn't seem to know I was there. And at first I thought, maybe he's just a neighbor. Maybe he got turned around. Maybe this is nothing. Kids talk themselves out of fear fast when the alternative is too scary to accept. But then he crouched down next to the base of the tree and started doing something with the rope ladder. Our rope ladder. The one that was our only way down. I crawled back to Danny and shook him awake. I pressed my hand over his mouth before he could say anything, the way I'd seen people do in movies, and I whispered so quietly I could barely hear myself. There's a man outside. Don't make a sound. Danny's eyes went wide. He nodded slowly, and I took my hand away. We sat together in the dark and listened. The man was still down there. We could hear him moving around, the faint sound of the ladder shifting against the tree. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. I remember gripping Danny's arm so hard he told me later I left a bruise. Then the sound stopped. Silence. And then, slowly, unmistakably, the rope ladder began to creak. The way it only creaked when someone was putting their weight on it. Someone was climbing up. I didn't think. I just reacted. I grabbed the flashlight, yanked Danny toward the door of the treehouse, and the moment that door was the only thing between us and whoever was on that ladder, I started screaming. Not words, just screaming, as loud as I possibly could. Danny joined in half a second later. The light in my parents' bedroom came on instantly. Then the back porch light. Then my dad's voice cutting through the yard like a thunderclap. "Hey!" The creaking on the ladder stopped. I heard footsteps hit the ground hard, the sound of someone jumping down and landing and running, crashing through the edge of the woods, branches snapping, the sound fading fast until there was nothing left but my own heartbeat and my dad's voice calling up to us asking if we were okay. We were not okay. My dad called the police that night. 2 officers came out, walked the tree line with flashlights, and found where someone had been standing in the soft ground near the base of the tree. The footprints were clear. A man's boots, a large size, pressed deep into the dirt, and a second set of prints right at the foot of the ladder. The officers told my parents the boot prints led back into the woods and eventually to a gravel road about a quarter-mile back where they just stopped, like someone had a car waiting. Nobody was ever caught. The thing that stuck with me, the thing that still sits in the back of my mind whenever I let it, was what one of the officers said to my dad while they stood in the backyard. He didn't think I could hear him, but I was sitting on the back porch steps wrapped in a blanket close enough to catch every word. He said, "Whoever this was, he didn't stumble onto your property. He knew that ladder was there. He knew those boys were up there." That sentence has followed me for 30 years because it means he wasn't a stranger passing through. It means he had been there before in the daylight watching, learning, waiting for the right night. And if Danny and I hadn't woken up, if I hadn't looked out that window at exactly the right moment, I genuinely don't know what would have happened when that trap door opened. My dad took the treehouse down the following weekend. I cried about it then. I don't cry about it now. We moved out of that house 2 years later, and I've never been back to that town. But sometimes, when the summer gets thick and warm and the nights go quiet, I think about that little wooden platform in the oak tree, and I think about a man in a jacket crouching in the dark. I think about how the scariest things in this world don't come with warnings. They don't announce themselves. They just wait patiently, quietly for the moment you let your guard down. I was lucky. I woke up. My dad built that treehouse when I was 7 years old. It took him 3 weekends, 2 trips to the hardware store, and 1 badly bent nail that he still talks about to this day. It sat in the back corner of our yard in rural Tennessee, tucked between 2 massive oak trees that had been there longer than our house, longer than our family, longer than anyone could remember. It had a rope ladder, a small window, and a wooden latch on the inside of the door. My dad said the latch was important. He said every good fort needs a way to lock itself from the inside. I didn't understand why that mattered back then. I do now. I was 11 the summer everything changed. My younger sister Callie was 8. She was the kind of kid who followed me everywhere, to the creek behind our neighbor's fence, to the gas station 2 blocks down when Mom wasn't watching, and definitely up that rope ladder into the treehouse. I used to complain about it. I used to tell her to go away and find her own friends. I'd give anything to take those moments back. That summer our neighborhood had a strange, heavy feeling to it. I don't know how else to describe it, like the air was thicker than usual. A few families on our street had started locking their doors during the day, which nobody ever did before. I heard my parents talking in low voices late at night, the kind of talking they did when they didn't want us to hear. I caught one sentence through my bedroom wall that July. My mom said, "They still haven't found where he went." I didn't know who he was. I didn't ask. The treehouse became our escape that summer. Callie and I spent entire afternoons up there reading comics, eating peanut butter crackers, playing on the old wooden floor my dad had sanded smooth. It felt safe up there, removed from whatever strange tension had settled over our street. It was ours. Then one morning in late July, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The rope ladder had been moved. I always left it hanging. Always. But when I came out that morning, it was pulled up and sitting coiled on the small platform at the base, like someone had climbed up and pulled it after themselves. I told myself maybe the wind did it. I told myself maybe Callie had gone up early, but when I went inside and asked her, she looked at me like I was crazy. She hadn't been outside yet. She was still in her pajamas eating cereal. I didn't tell my parents. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd just be laughed at. Maybe I already knew somewhere deep in my gut that the answer was something I didn't want confirmed. 3 days later, Callie found something inside the treehouse. A wrapper. A gas station sandwich wrapper, the plastic kind with the little sticker seal. It was shoved into the corner behind the old crate we used as a table. Neither of us had brought food up in at least a week. Callie held it out to me with 2 fingers like it smelled bad. It didn't smell bad, that was almost worse. It was recent, clean. Like it had been left there within the last day or 2. Someone had been in our treehouse, not just passing through, staying, sitting, eating. My hands went cold. I told Callie it was probably nothing. I told her I'd figure it out. Then I told her to go inside, and for once in her life she listened to me without arguing. I think she could hear something in my voice that I was trying to hide. I stood on that platform for a long time, looking out through the trees at the yard, at the fence line, at the stretch of open field beyond our property. There was no one there. There was nothing moving. But I felt it, that particular kind of knowing that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong, even when you can't point to exactly what it is. I told my dad that night. I remember watching his face shift from casual to serious in about 3 seconds flat. He asked me calm, quiet questions. When did I first notice? Had I seen anyone near the fence? Did the latch look disturbed? Then he picked up the phone and called someone, and he walked into the other room to talk. The next morning, two men came to our house. I thought they were police, but they were dressed normally in regular clothes. They walked our yard. They looked at the treehouse. One of them climbed up, and I watched from the back porch with Callie, who had attached herself to my arm like she was glued there. The man stayed up in the treehouse for a while. When he came down, he said something to my dad in a voice too low for me to hear. My dad nodded slowly, the kind of nod that means you already suspected something and someone just confirmed it. We weren't allowed in the backyard alone for the rest of the summer. About 2 weeks later, I finally heard the full story. Not from my parents. From a kid at the end of our street whose older brother had been listening to the police scanner in their garage. There had been a man. He had been living off the grid for close to 3 weeks after leaving a halfway house outside of Knoxville without telling his parole officer. He had been surviving in backyards, sheds, and apparently at some point in a treehouse belonging to 2 kids in a quiet neighborhood who had no idea he was 12 feet above their heads. He had been arrested 4 days after those men came to our house, picked up at a truck stop about 40 miles away. He hadn't hurt anyone. That's what everyone kept saying, like it was supposed to make it feel better. He hadn't hurt anyone. But here is what I kept coming back to, and what I still come back to more than 15 years later. There were 3 nights, 3 specific nights when Callie and I had slept in that treehouse. We did it twice a summer, every summer, a tradition. We'd drag our sleeping bags up the rope ladder after dinner, lie on that smooth wooden floor and look out the little window at the stars until we fell asleep. My dad thought it was sweet. My mom made us bring a flashlight. We had done it on a Friday and a Saturday and the following Wednesday. The food wrapper had a date stamp on it. I was 11 and I wasn't thinking about date stamps in that moment. But my dad was. He told me about it a year later when I was old enough that he felt he could. He said the stamp was a Saturday. The same Saturday Callie and I had slept up there. He had been in that yard while we were in that treehouse, while we were asleep 12 feet off the ground, with nothing but a small wooden latch between us and whatever the night decided to send. My dad took the treehouse down that fall. He didn't make a big deal of it. He just came home one Saturday with a crowbar, and by the time the sun set, it was gone. Just 2 old oak trees standing in the back corner of the yard like nothing had ever been there at all. I never asked him to explain it. He never offered to. Some things you just understand without words. That latch on the inside of the door, the one he'd been so careful about. The one he said every good fort needed, it had been latched from the outside on the morning I found the rope ladder coiled up. He knew that. I think that's why he didn't sleep for a week. I think that's why the treehouse had to come down. Because a lock only works if you're the one who put it there. These are Treehouse horror stories. If you are new to Mr. Terrifying, hit that subscribe button. Press the bell icon so you won't miss what's coming next. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, drop a comment below.